Coming up in a newscast tonight. Vietnam's top diplomat sat down for talks with his North Korean counterpart before wrapping up his visit to Pyongyang. The duo vowed to develop friendly bilateral ties and reportedly iron out details for Kim Jong-un's visit to Hanoi for his second summit with U.S. President Donald Trump. Last year, Seoul and Pyongyang announced plans to bring down 11 guard posts each along the border area. They dismantled all but one of the designated GPs on each side. Recently, South Korea's Cultural Heritage Administration announced plans to designate it as a cultural asset. President Moon Jae-in meets with heads of small and mid-sized firms as well as private business owners. He vows to provide greater government support, and together they discuss which areas of the administration's business policies need improvement. NEWSCENTER begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Chen. With the second Pyongyang-Washington summit to be held in Hanoi less than 2 weeks away, various preparation efforts are underway. The foreign minister of the host country held talks with his North Korean counterpart during a 3-day trip to the regime and reportedly managed to work out details, including leader Kim Jong-un's visit to Vietnam. Cha Sang-mi has our top story.
Vietnamese Foreign Minister Pham Binh Minh left Pyongyang on Thursday after his 3-day trip to meet his North Korean counterpart Lee Yong-ho. On Wednesday, on the second day of Minister Pham Binh Minh's visit, the two ministers vowed to build on the friendly ties between their nations that were built by the North's founding leader Kim Il-sung and former Vietnamese leader Ho Chi Minh. According to North Korea's state-run media, they also shared views on international issues of mutual interest.
The meeting was carried out in a very friendly ambience.
The top diplomats are said to have finalized the details of Kim Jong-un's visit to Hanoi for his second summit with U.S. President Donald Trump later this month, including protocol and security for the visit. It also looks likely that Kim will be visiting Hanoi as a guest of the Vietnamese state, which means the leaders of North Korea and Vietnam will come face-to-face for the first time in 55 years.
The main event is the North Korea-U.S. summit, but it is also vital for Kim to break the tradition of international isolation and display his status as leader, which makes his state visit a lot more likely.
Dr. Jo Han-bum, a unification expert, says that Kim Jong-un could visit infrastructure related to Hanoi's economic reforms to benchmark the Southeast Asian country's economic development, which may indirectly reveal his willingness to denuclearize. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
South Korea's National Security Council held a meeting today. During the session, it resolved to stay in close touch with the U.S. for the success of the Vietnam summit. The NSC also addressed this week's new agreement on sharing the cost of keeping American troops on the peninsula. They agreed the deal was a positive outcome and pledged to fully support its speedy implementation. So, keeping in close touch with Washington ahead of this summit, the Allies' top diplomats Kang Kyung-hwa and Mike Pompeo are meeting on this Thursday in Poland, where they're attending a multilateral meeting on security in the Middle East. Kang says the main agenda of their meeting is to prepare for the Kim-Trump summit and to discuss the recent visit to Pyongyang by Special Representative Stephen Biegun. Kang will talk about how South Korea can contribute to another successful summit and give the U.S. a general idea of the corresponding measures Seoul hopes Washington will grant North Korea in exchange for its moves toward denuclearization. Back in December, Seoul and Pyongyang dismantled 10 frontline guard posts each in the DMZ as steps towards building trust and establishing peace around the border area. Each side decided to preserve one GP out of the initially designated 11 spots, partly to let them serve as a reminder of history. Park Ji-won shows us how the atmosphere there has changed since.
This place is only about 300 meters away from the military demarcation line, the border dividing South and North Korea. And this now defunct facility used to be one of many frontline guard posts set up along the border. This guard post, located in Gosang, Gangwon-do province at the northeast of the demilitarized zone, started operations back in July 1953, right after the armistice agreement between the two Koreas came into effect. And until only last October, dozens of South Korean soldiers were stationed here. But as this was designated as one of the 11 guard posts that South and North Korea had each decided to remove as part of implementing last September's comprehensive inter-Korean military agreement, it is now all empty, devoid of firearms and troops, and with other facilities like electricity and water supplies also removed. The South Korean national flag and UN command flag that used to hang here are also gone. However, as the two Koreas decided to preserve one of the 11 guard posts each for historical reasons, this place has been preserved. North Korea has decided to preserve a guard post farther west, and the North Korean guard post that was located less than 600 meters away from here was demolished last fall. According to military sources, North Korean soldiers can sometimes be seen patrolling in the area. South Korean troops stationing at nearby posts say, despite reduced inter-Korean tensions at the border, they stay vigilant.
All our troops conduct operations with firm and full defensive readiness in order not to create any vacuum in our military defense posture.
It's believed that the South has about 60 and the North about 160 guard posts inside the demilitarized zone. Seoul's Defense Ministry officials say the ultimate goal of both Koreas is to remove all of them in the near future. The Cultural Heritage Administration also announced Thursday that this guard post will be designated as a national cultural asset to show its symbolic meaning. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Seoul's Defense Ministry said on Thursday that there is nothing wrong with its top military officer's visit to troops. He was responding to North Korean media's criticisms. On Wednesday, the regime's newspapers, including the state-run Rodong Sinmun, blasted South Korea's military for intensifying border tensions, referring to the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Park Han-gi's recent visits to troops before the Lunar New Year holiday. The ministry pointed out the general's trip was a part of regular schedule to maintain defense posture and boost soldiers' morale. Various civic groups from the nation crossed the border to seek out ways to expand inter-Korean exchanges. In the past 2 days, they visited Kumgangsan Mountain and also met with their North Korean counterparts. Oh Jung-hee has the highlights from their trip.
Starting a new year on the lunar calendar, representatives from South and North Korean civic groups gathered at North Korea's Kumgangsan Mountain on Tuesday and Wednesday. The aim of the event was to discuss the further deepening of interactions and exchanges between the two Koreas on various fronts. From South Korea, there were about 200 representatives from fields including the academics, culture, and labor, plus a few lawmakers. There were about 100 representatives from the North. South Koreans were more proactive in proposing joint projects. On the labor front, South Korean representatives proposed holding a joint event for laborers. On the religious side, monks invited their North Korean counterparts to Seoul for Buddha's birthday and suggested a joint temple stay program at a North Korean temple. The North Koreans responded positively to those proposals. But according to the South Korean attendees, the North Korean representatives generally stressed the need to resume operations at the two Koreas' joint factory park, the Kaesong Industrial Complex, and South Korean tours to the North's Kumgangsan Mountain. They also emphasized that international sanctions on North Korea should be lifted. The two sides adopted a joint letter of appeal where they called for efforts to activate inter-Korean exchanges. During the letter's drafting, South Koreans tried to include their support for Pyongyang's denuclearization, but the North Koreans refused, saying it's a matter to be discussed by their respective leaders. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in held a meeting with representatives of small businesses and the self-employed. It's part of his administration's efforts to help boost the economy from the ground up. According to Shin Se-min, he was clear about the importance of this group.
Promising more support for SMEs and the self-employed. President Moon Jae-in held yet another frank discussion session Thursday with representatives of business, the fourth of its kind since the turn of the new year. The president noted that as of the end of last year, self-employed people and SMEs numbered some 5.6 million, so he suggested they be treated as their own sector.
그러니 자영업은 우리 경제의 매우 중요한 한 축입니다. 자영업과 소상공인의 규모가 이 정도라면 독자적인 경제 정책의 영역으로 삼는 것이 마땅하다는 생각입니다.
Having listened to some of the difficulties faced by self-employed business owners, the president ordered his government to come up with ways to help lower the burden of credit card fees for them. The president also promised by 2021 to issue $16 billion worth of gift cards to be used at small businesses and traditional markets, while equipping the markets with better parking facilities, a factor that could directly boost sales. The president then revisited the idea of perhaps slowing down the government's minimum wage hikes, like this year's of nearly 11%.
최저임금의 인상을 결정하는 과정에서 자영업자와 소상공인들의 의견도 충분히 대변되도록 하겠습니다.
President Moon, while consistently pushing for one of his major economic policies, the income-led growth, brought up the possibility of less aggressive minimum wage hikes in light of the backlash from business circles and the weak job market. With the president's hopes for better economic circumstances for those doing business this year and his repeated hints that the minimum wage hike might have to slow down, such a move looks more likely in the coming years. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
There are growing concerns for the local economy, mainly due to slowing export growth and grim job figures. To turn things around, the South Korean government has unveiled new measures to encourage companies to win more orders to build infrastructure overseas. Ko Ryun-hee explains further.
To boost the sluggish job market and increase exports, the South Korean government has promised more financial support to encourage companies to win infrastructure and power plant orders in other countries. The announcement was made in an economic-related ministers' meeting on Thursday, chaired by Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi. Some of these countries have a high demand for infrastructure, but are considered exceptionally risky, with credit ratings at or below B+. So to mitigate the risk, the government will work with the state-run Export-Import Bank to provide some extra financial security. For instance, in the first half of this year, they will provide support worth $888.5 million, including loans and guarantees. The Finance Ministry added, though, that this process will require laws and regulations to be changed. The government also vowed to continue its work with related institutions to help companies win orders in less risky countries, too. The Export-Import Bank of Korea and the Korea Trade Insurance Corporation will increase financial support by around $1.8 billion in 2019. Over the past several decades, South Korea has built hundreds of billions of dollars worth of infrastructure in other countries, mainly in the Middle East, but orders have been falling. Last year's orders, worth around $32 billion, were only about half of the amount 5 years earlier. Ko Ryun-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea is trying to encourage innovation through cutting red tape, even setting up a so-called regulatory sandbox that gives companies more leeway to try new things. And now the government granted temporary permits under the system to a number of businesses, including wristwatches that send heart data to your doctor. Choi Si-young turns the spotlight to the chosen ones.
The regulatory sandbox grants waivers for some rules so companies can test new products and services for a set period of time. The Ministry of Science and ICT has reviewed a number of new business models in the sandbox, and on Thursday announced temporary permits to one product and two types of mobile services. The first is a cardiogram wristwatch that monitors the wearer's heart and sends that data to a doctor. The wearer can seek further medical care on that basis if the doctor recommends it. But the firm that makes the watch needs to get a permit from the Food and Drug Safety Ministry that says the watch is a medical device. The second is a mobile service that enables people to receive bills from the government for things like taxes, health insurance, traffic fines, and so on by text or messenger app. That service will be provided by South Korea's largest telecommunications company, KT, and instant messaging company, Kakao Corporation. The third is a mobile application that recruits people online to participate in clinical trials. Previously, the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety opposed putting such advertisements online, but the ban is now lifted. The Safety Ministry also rolled out guidelines on how the application developer should go about recruiting participants. The ICT Ministry said it'll keep an eye on these products and services to ensure there is no threat to public safety or security. And if problems arise, it says the permits will be revoked. Cheong, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in held a summit meeting with the Chancellor of Austria, Sebastian Kurz. The duo pledged to increase their countries' bilateral cooperation.
한국과 오스트리아가 오랜 우방국으로서 민주주의와 인권 등 보편적 가치를 공유하면서 우호 협력 관계를 발전시켜 온 것에 대해서 높게 평가합니다. 앞으로 또 밝은 미래의 벽면을 이렇게 함께 만들어 나가는데 서로 긴밀하게 협력해 나가기를 희망합니다.
It's the first visit to the nation by a sitting Austrian chancellor in 19 years. Despite the global trend towards protectionism, President Moon and his Austrian counterpart welcomed their country's record-high bilateral trade last year, which stands at about $2.9 billion and agreed to expand it via the South Korea-EU FTA. They are looking to improve cooperation and exchanges in the political and academic areas as well. The two leaders also called for joint efforts to tackle various issues, including the denuclearization of North Korea. From this year on, there's going to be more efforts in decentralizing law enforcement in the nation. More duties will be handed over to local police units. Kim Mo-kyun has the full story.
The Presidential Office of Cheong Wa Dae, the government, and the ruling Democratic Party of Korea say they plan to expand South Korea's local autonomous police system. The three groups agreed on Thursday to expand the system to 5 cities and provinces this year and nationwide by 2021. Currently, the system, which transfers some duties to police units under the control of local governments, has only been test operated in Jeju Island. Under the proposed bill, local police will be able to launch investigations into more practical duties, such as those related to sexual and school violence, safety of the disabled and senior citizens, as well as traffic accidents. They also agreed to give power to mayors and governors to tap the director and senior officials of their local police units.
We hope that through this bill, we will be able to come up with customized security policies for every part of the country that reflect each region's needs and particular circumstances.
A separate administrative police committee that consists of representatives from the government, police, and rival parties will also be formed to supervise and manage their operations.
We try to focus on providing a stronger police service close to the public's lives in terms of protection and local administrative affairs.
The three sides vowed to cooperate to legislate the bill and proceed with its implementation as soon as possible. If approved, it will mark the first time such a policy had been implemented in Korea's constitutional government. The Moon Jae-in administration has been pushing to adopt the system, making it one of its top agendas to make a safer nation for all. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
In 2018, a new law allowing patients to refuse life-sustaining treatment was passed. Since then, thousands of patients and their families have decided to spend the last moments of their lives in comfort rather than at a hospital. Lee Min-sun tells us more.
A year has passed since the so-called well-dying law came into effect on February 4th last year. Since then, thousands of end-stage patients have refused or ended life-prolonging medical care. The Health Ministry and Korea National Institute for Bioethics Policy released data on Thursday showing more Koreans accepted the idea of death with dignity, but that it still was more of a family decision. A year after the law took effect, more than 36,000 end-stage patients have either decided to end or not to receive life-prolonging medical treatment. In April last year, only about 3,000 patients agreed to end life-sustaining treatment. Such treatment refers to medical procedures such as CPR, respiration equipment, and anti-cancer drugs that extend life without treating the underlying illness. About 60% of end-stage patients were men, and most patients suffered from cancer followed by respiratory, heart, and brain disease. The data also showed that 7 out of 10 decisions were made by family members rather than the patient. The law states that the decision is up to the patient if he or she is able to communicate. But if a patient is unable to communicate or express their will, family members can make the decision with confirmation from 2 doctors. To avoid burdening their family with a difficult decision, over 110,000 people signed advanced medical directives to decide on their preference about life-prolonging care. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
The government released data on the number of abortions taking place in the country where cases of termination, while illegal, are rarely prosecuted. The issue is still controversial as it remains to be seen as a zero-sum game between pro-life and pro-choice values. For details, let's turn to our Oh Soo-young.
1 in 5 pregnant women in Korea were found to have had an abortion, mostly due to concerns about their livelihoods and long-term social prospects. On Thursday, the state-run Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs released rare data on abortions conducted in the country for the first time in 7 years. Out of the nearly 3,800 women surveyed who have experienced pregnancy, 756 said they have had a termination, most of them through surgical procedures. 10% of the women said they considered an abortion but hadn't gone through with it. The survey was conducted in September and October on women and girls aged between 15 and 44. Abortion is illegal in Korea under the Criminal Act, which imposes a maximum fine of 2 million won or a year in prison for intentional miscarriages. Physicians are permitted to carry out abortions only in the case of rape or incest, or if the pregnancy could jeopardize the mother or the baby's health. Still, abortions at medical clinics are considered an open secret in the country, with the law rarely enforced. Abortion pills are also becoming more attainable online and from overseas. In recent years, there have been growing calls to change the 1953 law, with 7 in 10 women against the criminalization of abortions. But the ethics of the issue over the sanctity of life and a woman's right to choose continues to be debated. In the recent survey, the biggest reasons that pregnant women considered ending their pregnancies were concerns about economic prospects and fears that a child could hinder one's career or academic prospects. However, for women who chose not to have an abortion, the value of human life was the most compelling reason. Meanwhile, the institute also said the number of abortions has been on a downward trend due to higher use of birth control, hitting 50,000 cases in 2017 from 342,000 cases 12 years earlier. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The Environment Ministry will enforce special measures to reduce air pollution starting Friday. All diesel cars will be banned from operating nationwide when fine dust levels exceed 50 micrograms for 2 consecutive days. And from June 1st, the regulated vehicles will expand to include all patrol cars as well. Also, while the alternate no driving day was only previously implemented for just public sector workers, the new emergency measures will cover every vehicle owner in the country. In addition, schools will either slash class times or close altogether when fine dust levels are deemed too high. Time to turn to Michelle back at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, the pleasant and comfortable sunny weather we had today will be gone by tomorrow, I heard.
That's right, Daniel. We are expecting sporadic precipitation throughout Friday, but mostly focused over on the central parts of the peninsula. And Pyongyang will be getting some snow as well, while Beijing can expect a bright, sunny Friday. And the amount of precipitation won't be enough to relieve the intense dry conditions we are facing these days. Now, most of the northern parts of the country will see between 1 and 3 centimeters of snow, or even less. And the south coast of Gyeongsangnam-do Province and Jeju Island will receive some light rain. Getting a glimpse at our temperature readings, the lows will be milder than today's, who are waking up to -3 degrees Celsius, while the southern regions will see up to 6 degrees. And the mercury into the day will rise up to 2 degrees in Seoul, Gwangju 7, while Daegu and Gyeongju hits into the low teens. And nice and comfortable weather is in store for next week, and along with another round of precipitation. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we could pack into tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thanks for staying with us.